National Institute for Defense Studies of Ministry of Defense, and I'm so thrilled to join this the cyber workshop, sponsored by DCAF and the other institutions. And let me start one thing. This is new theme, new members, new agenda, and new format of getting together. So digital connectivity is a key to success for constructive discussion with you. And in this session, we will have 90 minutes for discussions led by one presentation from Franziska Klopfer. She is a project coordinator, Cybersecurity Programme, Europe and the Central Asia Division, DCAF. Then we will have a second presentation from Chinese perspective by Dr. Lu Chuanying, a senior fellow, director of Research Center for Global Cyberspace Governance, Shanghai Institutes for International Studies, SIIS, China. And these will be setting the agenda and the framework for Q&A sessions. So I do welcome your very active participation to this workshop. And as to stimulate the discussion, I do encourage your reaction like this, having your hands up for questions and comments, or you may have kind of good one to accelerate our discussions. Okay, so we will have two distinguished speakers, and the first, Franziska. And the title of your talk is the Introduction to Cybersecurity Governance. You have the floor. Franziska, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yoshizaki. And again, good morning or good afternoon, good evening to all of you. I'm very honored to join this group of distinguished experts on security sector and also on cybersecurity, as I've heard, that have been gathering for some years, and I'm very happy to join you today when we introduce this topic of cybersecurity to the issue of good governance in the security sector. As I've said before, I come from DCAF and the Europe and Central Asia Division. And we have worked for many years already on cybersecurity and cybersecurity governance in a very applied way. We have supported governments, but also other stakeholders in the Eastern and Southeast Europe region on finding solutions to their governance problems. So I will go into detail of some of these issues later, but just to let you know that a lot of our really knowledge is based on practical experience. It's based on practical experience from one specific region, and that's why I'm also very interested to hear how this resonates with you, because obviously there are different cultural, legal, political backgrounds, and we can see where there are similarities or where you have other experiences. I will now start my presentation. I will share my screen with you. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
So for this presentation, my objectives are really twofold. On the one hand, I really want you to introduce you to this link between cybersecurity and good governance, because as I've heard, many of you are already experts in cybersecurity, so you are obviously very knowledgeable on the topic. But I want to introduce you to how thinking about cybersecurity from the good governance point of view helps to maybe think differently about some of the challenges that we have in cybersecurity. For those of you who don't know yet about cybersecurity, I think it's also maybe a useful introduction to the topic and a useful way of approaching cybersecurity. I also will in my presentation not go into too much detail, but my aim was also to introduce some of the topics that we'll discuss later in the workshop, so tomorrow and on Thursday. But to just give you a broad overview, what are the different governance issues in cybersecurity, and how an approach of good governance and applying the principles of good governance in cybersecurity could be a first step in addressing these challenges. So to start with, I really wanted to get us into this topic of cybersecurity and what cybersecurity really is. And I think a good way of starting about this, well, here's again, Albrecht has already mentioned the principles of good governance. I will get back to them later. Accountability, transparency, rule of law, participation, responsiveness, effectiveness, and efficiency. Albrecht has explained them very well. There are more, but these are some of the pertinent ones. But to go into a discussion about what cybersecurity is, I wanted to just kind of map some of the broad categories of threats, how we talk about it, often in lay terms as well. When you hear cybersecurity, people think of cybercrime, for example, or people think of cyber war, people think of cyber espionage, they think in terms of cyber terrorism, or also people increasingly talk about hybrid warfare and how cybersecurity relates to hybrid warfare. So to start with the first one, with cybercrime, I think this is something that when people new to the topic of cybersecurity, that's probably the first thing that they think of. They think of, criminals stealing data, or criminals using digital means to commit traditional crimes. For example, theft of monetary theft of money through the online banking system, for example, infiltrating a banking system and stealing money. Or one of the issues which is also related to cybercrime, often is mentioned a lot, is issues of violence or harassment through ICTs. So this is I think and definitely one of the main areas that we think of when we talk about cybercrime. And it's also, in terms of categorization, some people actually make a distinction between cybersecurity and cybercrime, but we prefer to include cybercrime within the broader bucket of cybersecurity, and I will explain in a moment why. I think for cybercrime, one issue that always comes to people's minds as well is that, of course, it's transnational. That the big challenge with cybercrime is that you have, you have the victim in, I don't know, your victim sits in Honduras, and the perpetrator who has stolen his money is in Poland, for example. So how do you then, as a policeman in Honduras, if the crime is reported in Honduras, how do you, even investigate this crime? How do you prosecute the criminal? And there, I think the important thing to mention is, so that's kind of the first governance challenge in a way. And there are some solutions to this in international law. There's one very important international convention, the so-called Budapest Convention on Cybercrime. I know from your region only Japan is member of this convention, but this is the convention was developed as an attempt to solve this issue of transnational crime. Then the other area that I wanted to touch upon is cyber war. And cyber war, I think, is a topic that we'll discuss quite a bit tomorrow when we talk about international law, because the cyber war, there are a number of challenges. Again, it is a word that is a concept that is shared increasingly. You hear it from time to time in the media. But the question is always, what is actually cyber war? And who is committing, who is, leading cyber war against which country? And I think it's a term that's often maybe being abused or used too much, or maybe used too little, because the big challenge with cyber war is the question, which rules apply to cyber war, or what does cyber war even look like? Because we have had many instances up until now of aggressions of one state against another using cyber means, but we have never had a state actually declaring cyber war. So first of all, the question is, okay, if I say now my country has been attacked by another country, but this country has not officially said that they have, attacked me, can this be a cyber war if it's not a declared war? And what is my now? What is my response? How are the rules of retaliation? And a part of this problem also comes from the fact that cyber war is usually, if there's an attack, for example, there's a cyber attack on, let's say, a critical infrastructure in a country. So through a cyber attack, let's say the national water system was shut down. And even if you have good investigators who trace back the who is behind the attack, it is usually not. It is usually a private person. It's usually some hacker. It is not. You will not find somebody with the state insignia sitting behind the computer, but because usually these kind of acts are committed through proxies, through private, let's say, cyber mercenaries, hackers who work for a state but are not officially, part of the state apparatus. So you have the cyber war. You have this problem of, what is a cyber war? When is it declared? I mean, how do you declare it? It's so new that it's not clear. And I think this is often used also, maybe one can say, by states because they don't officially want to, say that they are declaring war, but they are attacking another country. And then the question is, who is behind it? So how do you attribute it even? So it's all, usually when it is attributed to another country, it's based on circumstantial evidence. You're saying, okay, it's very likely that it was this country, even though we can't trace it back definitely to another country, but we know that we are in kind of conflict with another country, so we assume it's this other country. In general, in cyber, now there's been a lot of discussions at international level, and the colleagues tomorrow will go into more detail. But I think what is important to retain today is that some of the important discussions that have been had at UN level is the so-called group of governance experts and the open-ended working group. I will send you a link in a moment so you can look up more information on them. But basically, these are where groups. One of them is a group of government experts, and the other is also the open-ended working group. Is also mainly government experts, but non-state actors can attend meetings and give contributions to the discussion. But more importantly, this two groups which work in parallel but on basically the same topics, they are looking into how these issues of how international law applies to such issues of cyber conflict or cyber war. I mean, there's a general agreement that international law does apply, but the question is, how does it apply? And then they also look into issues of, international humanitarian law. Again, tomorrow, the colleague from the ICRC will go into more detail on that. But the work of these two groups is not finished yet, and we are kind of waiting, for more guidance from that process. The next kind of threat category that is often mentioned is cyber terrorism. Obviously, it was a lot on everybody's minds, in recent years. Cyber terrorism, usually, when people talk about it, they talk about basically terrorists using, for example, ICTs to either recruit people or to spread their propaganda, but also to use, again, cyber attacks as a way of destabilizing their enemies, whoever this terrorist group wants to intimidate and terrorize. So there, again, it is similar to the other areas that the challenge is often there of that these terrorists don't don't commit the attacks themselves, but they hire other people. But of course, but the issue of attribution, I think, is there a little bit less problematic, because usually terrorists are very keen on letting you know that they are behind behind an attack, and so they make it very clear that this attack should lead back to them. The fourth category, which is very important, and we don't know so much about it, is cyber espionage. I mean, we know that it is obviously happening a lot, and I think part of the reason is that the use of ICTs is really very vulnerable, or kind of to espionage, because the data is in many ways relatively easily, or a lot of data is very easily accessible, unless you really try to securitize it. So even on the very soft level, we know that a lot of data is being collected by all kinds of actors. And I don't want to call everything cyber espionage, but the fact that every individual now can, if you just want to collect intelligence on somebody, you can go on the internet and there you can find a lot of information just easily unsecuritized available. And a lot of it, and if you're a bit more tech savvy, you can also get into securitized data vaults. So cyber espionage, there we really also have this merge between public and private a lot, not just in terms of the actors and of those the technical hackers who go into the systems, but also those who are commissioning them, because we have also obviously a lot of economic espionage, and so it's not just even governments who are interested in that. What is another challenge with cyber espionage is same as with the cyber war and cybercrime and cyber terrorism, that it is almost sometimes difficult to make a clear boundary between cyber espionage and cyber conflict, or because for example, increasingly, groups who are trying to get to information, trying to get into, for example, servers, they either intentionally or unintentionally also obviously cause damage, not just to the one server that they are going into, but to others related servers as well. And therefore, while their intention might be just to get some information, they also cause wider damage to the system. So in a way, you can ask, okay, you are not just you basically causing damage, which is similar to what those who are aiming to to cause conflict are doing. So it is very difficult to make these distinctions, and then all of these areas really start flowing more and more into each other. And they do so especially in what we call hybrid warfare. I mean, you all, I think, are very much familiar with this concept, and I'm just mentioning it there because it's mentioned always in connection with cybersecurity. Hybrid warfare obviously is the concept of using several means, kinetic and non-kinetic, so online and offline, for your warfare. Hybrid, the concept also means that you don't have a definite start and an end to a conflict, so you don't have necessarily declaration of war and then peace agreement, or but that you have the almost a constant campaign of destabilization and attacks, which are led on several different levels, ranging from actual attacks to physical targets, or to disinformation, which aim to destabilize the country. Hybrid and cybersecurity really go together, because cyber attacks are whether either physical attacks or this what disinformation, as we also increasingly include in cybersecurity as well. All of that aims is a continuum, and now used regularly in what we call hybrid warfare. So just to summarize, I think what is clear here, and what I think I wanted to make the point, is that we are still in this phase of defining these different areas, and that there have been attempts, for example, in cybercrime, to streamline, get some agreements, international agreements on what is cybercrime and how we can work together on cybercrime. It's cyber war. These issues of regulation and international law are really being pursued for a number of years now, and we're waiting for response there. But the issue is also that the challenge keeps growing. So we will in the future, it will be very important to continuously see these challenges within a regulatory framework, a wider international regulatory framework, how we can adapt our understandings of these challenges. So we have, at least to a certain extent, we can introduce the rule of law. So here again, I just summarized some of what I have just said, is the challenge that we have of attribution, because the actors and their motives change, and the distinction between state actor and private actor are not always clear. As I said, that there's a fluid almost between what is cyber war, cyber espionage, and hybrid war and cybercrime. And what I think is also important is, through all of these means, anything can almost be a target. So given the dependence of almost large parts of our lives on ICTs, all of these are vulnerable to cybercrime or other cyber attacks. And therefore, for example, in any kind of policy area, now you have to consider cybersecurity as well. Just as an example, if you are in education and you are now restructuring your schooling system to have more online schooling, for example, you also have to obviously protect this infrastructure against possible attacks. But if you are in the health sector, and you are setting up a hospital, you have to make sure that all the technology is also safe, starting from the data on the patients to just the electronic network is safe from attacks. Then if you are working on elections, you have to also consider, for example, especially if some of the elections are done online, you have e-voting. Is the e-voting system safe? If you work on elections, is there any attempt at disinformation? to influence the electorate. So I think what is a challenge there for governance is that you cannot only say anymore, okay, this is a security issue, let's just work, with the security sector on this. And as I said, the international governance, we'll talk about this tomorrow, but this big question is about, which rules apply, or even if you agree, okay, international law applies, but how does it really apply? And that's what we'll discuss tomorrow in more detail. I just to start us off to get you involved as well. And by the way, what I forgot to say, if anybody has a question, please just interrupt me. I've especially if you have or a comment, because I really, as I said, would like to hear how all of this resonates with you in your countries. But anyway, to get you talking a bit or get you thinking a bit, I have a short poll, and Floris trying to help me. Okay, great. So if you could just answer this question. So imagine in your country, you have laws and strategies on cybercrime and cyber defense. Is that all you need for cybersecurity? Is your country then sorted? Do you agree or disagree? Or maybe also you're in between, you don't know, say both is right or wrong.
I don't know to what extent you can see how many people have voted so far, or roughly half of the participants have voted.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if the remaining 12 will...
Still a couple.
There's still a couple more. I think it's also because some people are not able to vote as being the co-hosts.
We already have a... Oh, great, I still some people thinking and voting.
So we can end the poll, perhaps.
Yes. Okay, so we have 29% for agreeing and 67 disagreeing, and 5 don't know. And that's very good and very interesting. And I think I have to, I could ask you back why you maybe somebody wants to say why they said agree or disagree. Somebody want to speak, and please just speak up because I don't see when you raise your hand. Well, I have to say all of you are in a way right, and I think there is a merit to all of your answers. As I said before, well, I think cybercrime and cyber defense are broad areas that cover a lot, and that a lot of the areas that are concerned when it comes to cyber security. And we've in our division, we've done a lot of work on national governance and national strategies and law framework. And I have to say, most countries do have very solid, strategies and law on cybercrime and cyber defense. And I think that really sets up a country very well to face cybersecurity challenges. But I wanted you to look at this next slide of mine, where I tried to it's a very basic scheme that I drew up, and it's really just to give you an impression. And let me explain to you what I mean. When we a lot of the times when we talk about the strategic framework on how cybersecurity relates to other policy areas, I think it's important to also remember that cybersecurity should always be considered as part of national security, and that in a national security strategy, for example, cybersecurity in one way or another should be mentioned or feature or be part of that process, and then of course within that you have cyber defense and cybercrime, and I think these should probably these circles should be a bit bigger, because but it was more my problem dealing with this with this smart circle system. But so I agree with those who have said that, you know, if you have cyber defense and cybercrime, you have covered most of cybersecurity. But there are also elements of cybersecurity which might not be necessarily covered by this issue of cybercrime and cyber defense, and some of them are related to what in some countries they call information society issues, like for example protection of you know, media literacy and protection of children. So these issues that are, you know, related to education, which are in a way a means of, you know, preventing cybercrimes, for example, to be committed if you promote media literacy. What is also very important is the link between cybersecurity and trade. And the fact that you know, especially international discussions on cybersecurity are usually also involve issues on trade, because a lot of the tools for cybersecurity are involved in trade discussions, are being negotiated in trade discussions, and then of course also foreign relations. And so in a way, to answer the poll, I think those who have said, you know, if you have law and policy on this, it is true you have covered most of the issues, but it is important that there are many other, you know, policy issues which are related to cybersecurity, which are mainly about reinforcing you know, the capacity of the individuals, but also the capacity of the state as a whole in engaging in international positive also cybersecurity, which should be considered when you approach cybersecurity as a policy and strategic field. The next I mean, we've talked a lot now about cybersecurity, and we haven't really, I think, defined it yet or said what we actually mean by cybersecurity. And I think I'm also kind of looking forward to hearing from you, because this is an issue that is usually defined in national law and varies from country to country, and also different emphases, as said, you know, depending on the legal and political, also, you know, cultural context of a country. I wanted to share with you one definition, which is a definition by the ITU, the International Telecommunications Union, which is part of, you know, the UN, and therefore it is obviously they try to find an international consensus on what cybersecurity is. And I give you a minute to read this definition. And maybe afterwards you can tell me what you think of it, of how it compares maybe also to the definition in your country. Have you had a chance to read it? Can maybe those of you, So-hyun, you said you are from South Korea, and you're a specialist in cybersecurity. I don't know how this resonates with you, and how it compares to, you know, the definition of cybersecurity in Korea, South Korea.
In my view, first of all, I'm not so sure we have a kind of national definition of cybersecurity. I'm not so sure whether other countries also have this one, because when I think of cybersecurity issues, we need, because I'm a lawyer, we need a definition. There are lots of security areas. We only traditionally we think of national security and military security, but if we think of human security, we also need to think of individuals. Each of individuals who has connected computer network system, they are kind of a part of millions of so many people's networkings, but they are just a little node, but they are also vulnerable, and then they are connected, and then they also connected to military they could be connected to the military networks, and then their vulnerability can also affect national security as well, even military security as well. Because of this issue, this reason, I think that cybersecurity is too broad to define for now, I think. And then do we have to as well, because if we define something, it's every policy or strategy or law starts from that definition, and we build up the kind of structure of rules and regulations and the norms things. In that point, for now, I'm not so sure about what's the Korean style of cybersecurity definition. So, but for now, I can say cybersecurity issues are all connected. As you before this page, you asked us about what's the opinion about cybercrime and cyber terrorism, and then things, so many areas. And then in my view, because of the biggest characteristics of cyberspace, everything is connected to each other. So because of that, the relationships are very, very important, especially between the public and the private, even the institutions and the individual, a person. So, so I think we need to think of cybersecurity is very, very broadly and very with open-minded for now. Yeah, that's for now. That's my thought. Yeah.
Thank you, Ange. No, I completely agree with you. I think, especially as you said, we are looking at something which is so evolving so quickly that it is finding a definition is maybe counterproductive in a way. At the same time, I think definition is sometimes useful just so that you know what you are actually talking about, but it is true, you don't necessarily have to define it in law. Some laws do it, others don't. This is more an international definition that is now for the ITU for their purpose, and some countries do define it. But I don't know, does anybody else have an opinion on that? Want to share their experience? I mean,
Franziska, sorry.
Yes.
There's a comment by Jinghua Liu.
Yes,
maybe Liu, maybe you want to explain it. I mean, you want.
I think he was referring to earlier. Yes.
I didn't post any comments.
No,
but yes.
I think the comment in the chat is from Genuine Cho.
Sorry,
right. So Dr. Cho would like to make comments about the foreign relations. There will be something international cooperation. Would you elaborate a bit more, please?
Yeah, I think he's referring to this.
Yes, I understand. This is just an initial diagram you are thinking about. This cybersecurity wider national governance framework. I agree with your initial proposal. However, I think we need to think about some foreign relations. It may be about some diplomacy or some drafting treaty among states or nations. So it means it needs some coming to national security area together, like some cyber crime you may know about this, Budapest Convention. This is one of the things that you need something think of more about this issue. Well, I thought about some layered approach for the cybersecurity governance. It will be starting from the national perspective, like we think about in one country. However, we have more two layers, like some regional layer, like EU, Asian, like ARF, or some OSCE. And more of that, there will be global cybersecurity governance framework, like some UN. As you mentioned, the UN just finished was report from the open-ended working group. Yeah, this is one of the approach, but typical approach will be GGE. Only 20 UN members.
Group of government experts, yeah.
Yeah, right. So we need to consider more comprehensive, open-minded to think about many different issues. It is so diverse issues involved in this cybersecurity issues. It will not easy to finish just one picture or some diagram.
Yeah. I completely agree with you, and thanks very much for your comments. And I just tried to, it's completely simplified mine, and I think we made a very good point that this, foreign relations actually relates to national security and also to cybercrime. And actually, I have to find a different way of displaying that, and please apologize for my bad, very simplistic way of displaying this.
No, this is a good starting.
But I think it's a good starting point, and I agree with you. And I think you can't emphasize this issue of foreign relations enough. And that's something I also want to emphasize. And I don't know about your countries. I know that in the countries that I work a lot, unfortunately, that is often overlooked when you look about cybersecurity. Often there's not enough capacity for cyber diplomacy. And countries really don't engage enough in this foreign relations aspect of cybersecurity. But yeah, so I try to put it here. It's still not right, but it's thank you very much for your point. I have to work on this on this scheme and on my skills there. But thanks for your point. But going back to what was just said about this definition, one point that was made that I think is very, very relevant is this issue about that this definition. In this definition, you should think about who are you actually, who is cybersecurity really for, and it's this. Relating it to the people, that security, as we have in this approach of good cybersecurity governance that Albrecht was explaining in the beginning, that in the good governance approach, security is really aiming to protect the people and and really look as the needs of the people, see the person, the individual, and certain groups in society as a starting point about what security we really need. And I think this definition doesn't have that, because it, as I said, they probably try to make it as broad as possible, and they focus only on the technical and what the technical that or the data and technical aspect that cybersecurity is trying to protect, but. What I wanted to actually get at is exactly this point about human security and how human security applies to cybersecurity. Albrecht defined human security earlier. So for human security, the question is always, what is at stake for the individual, and what are the threats and risks for different members of society or the community as a whole. If you apply this to cybersecurity, you might come up with a different definition of cybersecurity. And I think one approach, one starting point would be to to recognize that individuals and communities have different security needs, and then also apply the same principle also in cyberspace. And the reason why this is, I think, important is just very practical, also from the experience that I have now had. We've started to work a lot in our region, doing research on, for example, online gender-based violence, or issues related to gender-based violence committed through ICTs. And we see that this is an policy area that is really very much not under research or under addressed also by governments. And partly it is maybe because when governments think about cybersecurity, they think about these technical aspects, and not so much yet, or not sufficiently, about what is actually happening to the individual, what is happening to what are the risks of this person, for example, a young boy who's 6 years old. He has, his risks are differently than somebody who is an adult and uses, for example, ICTs to work. For those whose work depends on ICTs, if there's an attack on the wider ICT system, that has a really big impact on their work. If somebody is very active in social media, if social media is either disabled or he's being harassed on social media, then his life is also impacted in different ways. So I just wanted to put this concept out there and saying that this has really helped us to broaden our view on what cybersecurity is and how we start to research cybersecurity in our region. Another issue that Albrecht has discussed earlier already is this concept that we have in SSG about this holistic approach to security. And I just repeat what he has said earlier, looking at security not just at those who provide security or those who benefit from security, but also those who need to manage and control, and those who need to oversee what is done in security. And this is, I think, the idea behind, obviously, is to make sure that the security sector functions well in a democratic state, that there's accountability in particular. And I wanted to kind of quickly show you how this can be applied in the security sector. Some of the questions that we've asked ourselves when we try to apply this concept in the cybersecurity sector. And there's a little exercise that I have done previously with my colleagues, and I wanted to just show it to you as an example of how complex this question is. So we have here the different categories, as I told you, and somebody who benefits from security, somebody who provides it, somebody who controls it, and somebody who oversees it. So just as an example, so if I say, for example, private companies, so where would they be? I mean, so I think private companies are obviously benefiting from cybersecurity. So if you for example, you have a little enterprise that produces garments, for example, and you sell these garments online, then of course you need cybersecurity to protect your online system. And then so they're beneficiaries. But there's also private companies that provide cybersecurity. So they are, in a way, you can say, the private actors in the middle. Then individual users. So if I use ICTs I obviously need to benefit from cybersecurity, but I might also be a security threat, for example, if I am not very well aware about how to use how to, if I click on the wrong link and therefore, become the victim of some kind of phishing attack, then I destabilize my whole network. Then there's the other question is, government. Where does government stand? I mean, on the one hand, government is obviously there to provide, and also part of the government to control those who provide security and also cybersecurity, but they're also beneficiaries. So in a way, they're in between all of these. Then one actor that I wanted to talk to you about is Parliament and other oversight actors. So obviously they are there to oversee cybersecurity. But I wanted to ask if any of you have can tell me is whether your parliament, the parliaments in your countries have already discussed cybersecurity in any meetings or in any way. Does somebody know about this, or maybe not know, or what is your opinion there? For example, in Japan, somebody from Japan, do you know whether this is an issue that is being discussed in parliament?
Franziska, should I confirm one thing? Your question is about the Japanese situation, about the diet debate, about the cybersecurity or cyber defense.
Yeah, or is cybersecurity, does the parliament work on cybersecurity? Do they oversee the work of cybersecurity?
Okay, so your question is about the parliamentary dietary oversight, about
exactly.
International the cybersecurity. Okay, I'd like to invite the Japanese participant to respond. How is Japanese diet oversight about the cybersecurity? Do you have any idea? 時藤様とかいかがでしょう、矢野様とかいかがでしょうか。About時藤さん or Yan-san, about what is your opinion?
It's maybe a difficult question, and also I'm not surprised, because effectively from the countries that I know from Europe, there may be a couple of countries, not many, where parliaments have already started to look into cybersecurity. And I think the challenge there is very much, on the one hand, again, this issue of which policy area is it? Because usually when you go, we work a lot with parliamentarians as well, and when you go to parliamentarians, you go to those committees who are in charge of overseeing security sector, then they often say, well, cybersecurity, that is for the telecommunications people. That's for the telecommunications committee. That's not for us. And it's really only slowly this awareness is being created that this is really, as I said previously, also an issue of national security that you have really and also an issue of foreign relations and an issue of internal security. And but this is slowly growing, and I think this is something where we need to do a lot of awareness raising. We need to work a lot with the parliaments to first of all make them aware that this is an issue that they need to address, but also that to help them get the right capacities. Because the other challenge is, even if parliaments would say, yes, we want to oversee cybersecurity, then the next question is, how would they do this? First of all, they need to have expertise. Cybersecurity is not an easy subject. You can't really read up on it in 5 minutes. You really need to have, some support there, some people who brief you on this issue. Then the next challenge is, and I think that's probably the biggest challenge that we would have in governance terms, is how, given that so much in cybersecurity, as you can see here, is done by private companies. So the private companies provide cybersecurity. Private companies benefit from it. Private companies might be even there at the management and control of cybersecurity. So how do you as a parliament oversee these? Because a parliament has, by law, the mandate and the power to call on state institutions. So if if we, for example, look at this diagram here at this table and would just talk about the police, then it's really quite straightforward. You have, police providers will only be the state will be providing, law enforcement, and the control will only be, the management of the police, and therefore it's easy for the parliament. They will just have to call on the Ministry of Interior and on the head of police if they want to hear, the report of what's happening in the police, in law enforcement. But here it's much more difficult, and do they have the power to call, a private company to tell them what are you doing, and maybe hold them to account if something goes wrong, if there's a big cybersecurity incident? How do you hold a private company to account in this context? So this is the biggest challenge when it comes to oversight of cybersecurity. As I said, on the one hand, making parliaments aware that they are responsible for this, or they should be looking into this, giving them the right kind of knowledge so they can understand the topic, and then also in a way clarifying what are the what are the roles and responsibilities of the private actors, and how should they be in law, and therefore how can they hold these private actors accountable if they don't fulfill their roles.
I want to point out one thing about the private companies. I agree with you partly, but think about the big tech company like Google, Apple, Facebook. Some private companies are technical based, and then the other hardware based, and then the other one is software based. In that case, I think we cannot put the private company simply on as a beneficiary or provider, something like that. They are very comprehensive and complicated actors. For example, they also can have a control, and they could be an overseer. Sometimes, in case of Apple, when they denied to cooperate with the government to decode their customers' cell phone, in that case, sometimes technical companies have more power than government or authorities. In that case, they could be a controller of cybersecurity. So I think we need to more classify the private companies' technology or their tasks or their business models. So we need to also consider them as well. And then the one thing I want to talk here is the last question about the national cybersecurity law. In case of Korea, we also tried, I think as far as I remember, twice. We tried in our parliament, we tried to pass a national cybersecurity law, kind of overall regime to control and to oversee the whole nationwide cybersecurity sectors, or overall regime. We wanted, our parliament, our congressman wanted to make it, but it's failed finally, because it was last try was, I think, 2017 around, and then it was failed. The biggest issue was, as you mentioned before, there are a lot of issues, but in case of Korea, in my view, the biggest issue was also about governance. Who's the kind of authority to take whole responsibility about the national cybersecurity? In that case, because the already existing ministries and authorities are all they are distributed to each of their sectors. For example, Ministry of Defense, they oversee very military security, cybersecurity issues. And in case of, we have a National Intelligence Department, in case they also have kind of state interest in the national cyber intelligence. And then in case of industry, we have a Ministry of Industry. In that case, they have their own, interests in of their power. So we have to readjust, authorities and power distribution in domestically. But finally, it's really not easy to do that. Readjust all powers and authorities between the ministries and institutions. So finally, the last act was not passed. So maybe next time, I'm not so sure whether there will be another try to pass the overall Cybersecurity Act. But many of experts in Korea, they agree we need a kind of very well-organized control tower and then well-organized cybersecurity system in our country. Many of us agree with the necessity, but it's not easy to follow the ideas. Always the reality is not easy to clear cut. So yeah, that was the last issue in Korea. Yeah, I introduced.
No, thanks very much for sharing that. And I think I'm not surprised about what you're saying, and I agree with you that these roles are really very difficult to categorize. What I want to say there is my conclusion, exactly what you said, that it is really important that each country looks at how to define these different roles and responsibilities, but also in a way that makes sense for the country. Because as you said, if you say that the big companies, they kind of provide and control and do everything, and nobody controls them, that's obviously also not right. If they are higher in a way than the state, than the government, that's something that needs to be addressed. But which is often the case in reality. But it needs to be defined probably through work at national level. But Professor Yoshizaki, you wanted to come in.
No, because
you raised your hand. No, you didn't.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I noticed that your slide is number 11 or something out of.
Yes, I'll be finishing in
yes,
a
I
moment.
was wondering.
Yes. Now, now I'm just doing
because I'm a timekeeper.
Yes, okay. Yes. No, I'm thanks very much. So actually, I just wanted to, this is again just a summary of what we've just said, that it's important to define these roles and responsibilities. So I'm already at the summary, and I'm of what we said before. Just again to put these issues out there. We've discussed it, that the cybersecurity governance challenges that we see a lot in our work, and it seems to be also in your region, is this issue about how to do oversight and control of cybersecurity, how work on the legal framework. Even if you have a legal framework, it constantly needs to be adapted, and also it has to be, there's much more work needs to be on the international legal framework and its application. One area that I think we will discuss tomorrow as well, that I wanted to just mention briefly here, is this practical issue of coordination and cooperation, because we talked a lot about roles and responsibilities and different actors, how they have to interact, but we haven't talked too much yet about how they should interact and best practices. And of course, everybody knows in cybersecurity, since you don't have this clear distinction anymore, it's only the state providing security, that you have to have private and public actors involved. How do they work together? And I think there are many good examples. We have quite some from our region that I'm happy to share also tomorrow, or when there's an occasion. How to organize, for example, public-private cooperation on all kinds of different issues, whether you now talk about public and private working together on protecting critical infrastructure, or public-private sector working on awareness raising and education. So these are issues that really one has to work on from the when one works on cybersecurity governance challenges. And one last one, which is I just wanted to bring up, this is importance, of course, is this having this sufficient pool of experts. We haven't spoken about it yet, but this is always the biggest, one of the big questions when you talk about public cybersecurity capacities. I haven't seen a country yet where they even the most advanced in ICTs, where they don't say we would need more experts in cybersecurity, and this is something that has to be therefore it relates to the national education and capacity building strategy as well, because you have to, as a country, think about how do I make sure we have enough supply of experts. So as a kind of final way of concluding, I want to just say again, look at these, just some of these principles of good governance that were mentioned earlier by Albrecht and that I also mentioned in the beginning, and just to say again how they apply to cybersecurity as a way of a summary. So if you look at effectiveness, that it's quite straightforward. As in other areas of security, this is important that cybersecurity is effective and so that it provides security to networks and citizens. And related to that is also this issue of responsiveness that we discussed a lot today, in the context of human security, so that cybersecurity should have the security needs of the individual and the community as a whole as its center. At its center, all members of society should be able to participate safely and fully in an online life. So if, as a starting point, if you want to discuss responsiveness, that's one how you could apply the principles of good governance. Accountability, we just discussed it quite a bit related to this issue of oversight, and I think there what I would just like you to retain from what I've said is that ensuring accountability in cybersecurity is not easy for a number of reasons, because as we said in the beginning, it's difficult sometimes to attribute where certain actions come from, whether they are now hostile or not. And then the other issue of accountability is, because there are so many actors involved in cybersecurity and many of them are private, how can we establish a system of oversight and control? And in addition, if most of these actors are actually not even in your own country. So as was mentioned by Sohyun, how do you deal with Google, who are not in your country, they have the headquarters not in your country, and how do you have either through law but also through oversight hold them to account it, so accountability is also to ensure that all the different actors are actually deliver effective and efficient cybersecurity. So you hold them to account and say, do you actually, you say you provide cybersecurity, but how do you do it? And that the oversight actors not only look at the work of state actors, but also oversee how non-state actors impact the security of all members of society. Rule of law, we mentioned a lot in the beginning, where I mentioned this importance of these discussions at international level about how international law really applies in the cyber world. And as just as a way of summary, I wanted to say that cybersecurity calls for new approaches to regulatory frameworks in a system where state and non-state actors have to work together effectively. New governance models and flexible approaches to organizing regulatory frameworks have to be found. And to ensure that cybersecurity's effectiveness and accountability, the legal and regulatory framework in cybersecurity needs to be based on the rule of law and be in line with the principles of democratic governance. And then finally, participation. This goes without saying that cybersecurity, as I said, requires the cooperation of all actors, public and private, and we have to think about new models. But that it's very important that this shouldn't mean that anybody just takes part in anything, but rather that you have a real understanding about what is the role of each actor in the legal and constitutional sense. How does it apply to cybersecurity? And therefore, how can we work together, and what kind of models of cooperation can we think of that to cooperate, that we work together effectively in there. I just want to mention we are about to, today or tomorrow, we'll publish a new publication on public-private partnerships in cybersecurity that we did specifically for the Southeast Europe. Might be interesting for you to read, because it's very practical, really looks at how can different actors come together, especially overcome maybe issues of trust and work together effectively. So that's all I wanted to say for today, and thank you very much for listening and participating, and I look forward to your questions later.
Thank you, Franziska, for giving us a general introductions about the security sector governance. And my assumption is that not all the participants today is an expert of SSG. Some are expert of the cyber, or some are expert of national security. So this is a very good introduction to have a general views. And the point here is that security sector governance has a major principle, like the transparency, rule of law, participation, effectiveness, efficiency, accountability. These are new challenges when we talk about a cyber crime or cyber security, because attribution issue is always uncertain, and there is a huge gap about each actor. So this is a very good introduction. Thank you, Franziska, again, for giving us a big picture. Then we will have a regional perspective from China. Thank you very much for your the patience. And so we will have a second speaker, Dr. Lu Chuanying, a senior fellow, director of Research Center of the Global Cyberspace Governance and Shanghai Institute for Internet Studies. Dr. Lu, floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Chair. And at first, I want to have some comments on Franziska's speak. I think it's a very good presentation, and it's very comprehensive and covered a lot of important areas. So according to your presentation, I think that China, or according to my personal studies, we shared a lot of the same knowledge and understandings. And for example, like this, what is the standard of the good governance, and how do you understand the cybersecurity? Like you mentioned, the cybercrime, war, espionage, terrorism, and where are the threats, and how to establish a framework, and of course the definition of cybersecurity. And that's the challenges. I appreciate that all this you contribute to the studies of cybersecurity, and it's very helpful for us to create a framework, a broader framework to understand cybersecurity issues. So I would like to second, I would like to share some of my studies on how China's because it's actually the very broad issues. Even I just want to focus on the regional China's perspective, but cybersecurity is still a very big issue. So first, I would like to introduce some of the Chinese practice or on the cybersecurity. And first one is the organizational structure. Because I think that it's important to emphasize the government rules in cybersecurity, because the government takes the final responsibilities, and that is important. I think in 2013, maybe the end of 2013 and the early of the 2014, Chinese government established the how to say the leading groups on cybersecurity. It has a very long name. I cannot remember the name, but but this is the lead by the President Xi Jinping. So is a cross-agency organization, which means that the government realized that cybersecurity is a top or prioritized issue in the state agenda. So then, after on the central government level, then we have the provincial level and the city level. We establish our third level governance of the cybersecurity, and the leaders of the country, like Xi Jinping, and the leader of the governance, the governor, or in China called party boss of the governor, and the city, the top leader lead this organization on cybersecurity. So which reflects the truth China paid enough attention on this issue. And secondly, after we have all this organization or agencies. So then I mean, the leading group is just a coordination body, but under that coordination body, we do have the office. We call it CAC, China's Cyber Administration of China, which is a standing organization which have hundreds of people. It's more like a ministry in 2014. So these ministries are not just the standing body over there. It's take care of the daily business of the coordination of cybersecurity issues. So I think that we call it in China, we call it the general structure of state governance on cybersecurity. And then after the establishment of the CAC, it published a lot of the important strategies on national strategy on cybersecurity and the cybersecurity law. And recently we want to publish the data security law and the personal information protection law. I think all this strategy and the laws and also the regulations are important, but also based on the previously we have the leading structure, the president are paid enough attention to these issues. So compared with the China and European unions, I think that Chinese government published a very comprehensive legal system on cybersecurity issue. And the third one, I think is I want to emphasize is the public-private cooperation. The reason I emphasize on this because it's previously we know that we believe that the government dominate the resources, dominate the talent, dominate the techniques, right? But right now in the digital world or in cyber area, we found out that the big tech giant, like in the US, you have Apple, who have the most advanced critical capacity even than the NSA, right? In China, the same thing. We have the Alibaba, Huawei, this tech giant. They have a lot of advanced technology, and they're running the infrastructure and the critical infrastructure. So you have to create a new model to cooperate with each other. But unfortunately, this kind of cooperation be criticized a lot by the Western country, like military, civilian, confusing. This actually is just reflect the truth that the civilian or the market occupied or they have more advanced technologies and as well as talent. So the government have to cooperate with them. So I think it's something new, but not should be criticized. And the first thing I want to emphasize is education, because it's a new thing that in maybe 10 years ago, we believe cybersecurity is just a technical issue, right? And it's just limited to the IT areas. But right now we found out, according to the Franziska's presentation, we found out that cybersecurity area everywhere, right? Is related to every different areas. So we need a lot of talent. we're not just need the technique or who studies computer science, but also need the political science, the law professors, and the economists, right? So we need a lot of the cross-domain scholars or cross-subject scholars who know traditional area, but also cybersecurity. So the Chinese government established a lot of the very creative method to encourage university to have more studies on the cybersecurity education. And the fifth area I want to emphasize is international cooperation. So it's we believe that cybersecurity is cross-boundary issues. You may pay attention to, we have the mechanism with the United States. We promote the norm of the cyber espionage. States should not engage in cyber espionage for the purpose of the commercial, right? We have the dialogue with EU, with UK, with Australia, a lot of the bilateral one, as well as the regional one in ARF and African Union, but also Arabic League and something like BRICS countries, and as well as the Shanghai Cooperate Organizations. So there are a lot of the regional cooperation as well as international one. So China is the state who always, from the very beginning to until now, participated in the UNGGE and as well as the G20 or the international cooperation. And China also promoted the Digital Silk Road, which is also the digital economy and cybersecurity cooperations with some regional countries. But these are something Chinese government do to pay attention to and invest it in these areas. But also the last part, I want to share some of the challenge when Chinese government or the society dealing with the cybersecurity challenge. And the first one is sovereignty. I think at the very beginning, in 2014, 2015, and when we have the dialogue with the EU and the United States, people are, first, they disagree with to use the term of sovereignty, especially cyber sovereignty. They believe cyber sovereignty is just kind of the isolated, method from the cyberspace. Or cyberspace is a global commons. But actually right now, you found that take the European Union as example, emphasize on the digital sovereignty, tech sovereignty, data sovereignty, right? So at the very beginning, I think in 2013, when Chinese government want to use this term, it just reflects that, especially after the Snowden case, then you find a lot of the vulnerabilities in your critical infrastructure and your network. I just quote the thing from the President Xi Jinping that you don't know who get into your network, you don't know what they did in your network, and you don't know whether it's your friend or your enemy. So that is just the situation in 2013. There's no protection of your network at that moment. So that's the most important reason why Chinese government emphasize on the sovereignty. We want to establish the capacity to protect ourselves, and secondly, we want international law to provide some kind of rules to protect those weaker who are lack of the capacity or lack of the advanced technology, and to convincing the advanced country to do some self-refrain, right? For example, to stop this kind of the PRISM and there are a lot of this kind of the projects just leaked by the Edward Snowden. And so this is the important one of this cyber sovereignty. And I think the second challenge, I think, to the government is how to balance the development and the security. So everybody enjoyed the freedom, the benefit of the internet, right, is such a useful tools for every users. But when you ask them to invest in security, nobody will take care of it because they don't want to spend the money. They don't want to hire people to do it. Remember, when we discussed this issue 7 years ago or 10 years ago, we have different understanding right now. And after the 10 years education of the so many cybersecurity case or accident, people realize that we need to invest more on cybersecurity. But right at that moment, people don't want to talk about security. They just want to enjoy the benefit. So, and also we try to let the decision maker, either the different government agency or the company CEO, to understand that the investment in cybersecurity are benefit, that not just protect your network, but also raise your capacity, because the society, your customer, your users are changing their mind. They're more concerned about security rather than just the benefit or how the APP or this kind of the applications. So when you have a higher level of the security capacity, then the user more like to adapt your applications. So this is become a kind of the rules right now. So the third thing I want to emphasize of the challenges awareness. I just mentioned some of the awareness. Is the first is how you pay attention to it, and the second thing about awareness is if I want to pay attention to cybersecurity, but I don't know what is related to my business, right? So it's so complicated. I don't know the cybersecurity with my business, with my agents. Like most people believe cybersecurity is just a network security issue. It's a technical issue. It's not. Right now, we know that you have the critical infrastructure protection, you have the data security, you have the privacy issue. But 10 years ago, who knows, right? So if we have the National Cybersecurity Week every year, I think in start from the 2014. So at that week, so we have a whole week event to educate the public, educate the decision maker, educate the business, and we organize a lot of the event like cybersecurity to school, cybersecurity to community, cybersecurity to people. I think these methods are very important to raise awareness. So also the last thing is the talent. No, you cannot find enough talent. Even after so much investment in the past 10 years, we still lack of the enough talent to doing the cybersecurity protection or even the cybersecurity research. Take my institute as example. We do want to. Right now, we just have me, just one man. My four my study fully focused on cybersecurity. We have some part-time or non-residents, but we do want to make our one-man center become our 10 people's institute under the SIIS. But I cannot find enough people. We do have the money, we do have the positions, but you look at whole China, you cannot find qualified, experienced talents. So that is also the challenge for these areas. So, and also we are facing the challenge of the big tech companies who want to recruit people from our institute, from the university, from the big think tanks, because they have more money. So it's very competitive for us. So I think my time is up, and and thank you for the invitation again. And I would like to, I know we do have some time for the Q&A. So let me stop here.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Lu, for very frank about your challenges. And the last portion about the recruitment of the talented people. Well, this is the common challenge, including our institution. We have a similar challenge. I cannot agree more about that. And thank you very much for clarifying the common challenges, like differences in interpretations about the sovereignty. You mentioned that Western country, including European Union, the focus on the civil society, parliamentary control, and this is the lesson learned from the peaceful solution of a conflict or peace management. And the history shows that this kind of transparency or accountability should be a foundation. These are the European experiences. And from Japanese or from the Asian perspective, we may have a bit different perspective, but that is a quite unique contribution of this DCAF Asian Pacific unit. Plus, you talked about the business one and the business-driven cyber development. While we care more about the cybersecurity, cyber crime, or cyber warfare, hybrid warfare. So there may be a kind of gap about the perception of the cyber awareness. So thank you very much again for Dr. Lu for highlighting these key lessons learned for our important workshop. Okay, I'm sorry, our time is almost running up, but could I propose to have a 10 minutes extension for more Q&A? And so I do welcome your comment and questions by using this one. Okay, the raising your hand. You can have a reaction from the Zoom functions. So, and also you can have a chat functions to show your, or you may physically raise your hand. Okay, who's gonna start? Okay, Dr. Huang, please. Dr. Joseph Huang, please. Yes.
Thank you for the presentation, which is very fantastic and also very informative as well. I also wanted to take this opportunity to say hello to Dr. Lu. We actually met each other at the SIIS in Washington, D.C., as you remember. By the way, I would like to also have a question for Dr. Lu about cyber sovereignty. Rather than saying cyber sovereignty, I would like to use cyber territorialization, as I mentioned that idea to Dr. Lu when we were in Washington, D.C. And as we all know, there are a lot of cybersecurity laws has been published by Chinese government, as Dr. Lu mentioned earlier. So one of them, I feel like is very important one and the symbolic one is so-called data localization. So I would like to have comments from Dr. Lu about data localization. How do you feel data localization is very vital and important for cyber sovereignty if the idea is very useful and important for other countries? Thank you.
Dr. Lu, please.
Hi, Dr. Huang. So yes, I try to answer your question, and the data localization is first is not a concept invented by Chinese. Actually, we learned that from the European Union. But look at the Chinese. If you make a comparison between Chinese data security law and the GDPR, you will find out that almost 80% of the content are the same. So we learned a lot from the GDPR. We communicate a lot with the GDPR, the European counterpart. And secondly, I want to say that I agree with you. The data localization is actually is not good for the digital economy, especially for the international digital economy. It also have negative impact toward the global, like ICT, like the business. And but what I want to say is first, the state have their priorities. if you're a government, every government has the priority is security, right? And secondly, if you look at the global environment or WTO, either WTO or other global institution, we do not have the global coordination or global rules or laws over here. So my understanding is the WTO will launch the digital economy dialogues or negotiations soon. So after the WTO have some kind of the regulations or result, so it will be some kind of the change of adjustment of the domestic law. So that is my understanding. And also this kind of adjustment should be the under the same standard and the same pace of the states like the European Union, United States, China, and other regions, countries will take the same step, right? Accept the same rules. So, but currently the priority is cybersecurity.
Thank you, Dr. Lu. Okay, I'd like to open the floor and welcome the question from participants. And also, I'm very interested in the Franziska reaction to the Dr. Lu, because he underlined the kind of different perspective as to the data sovereignty issues. Okay.
Thank you very much. No, I found, thank you also, Dr. Lu, for your presentation. There were many interesting points, which some of them which I want to take up. I think, yeah, data sovereignty or sovereignty is of course an important issue, but some of the issues that you mentioned, I want to underline, and one of the first ones that you put an emphasis on, I couldn't agree more with this importance where you said you described the governance structure in China and this leadership on cybersecurity from the highest level. I think this is very important for cybersecurity at national level to work well. You have to have the not just agreement from the highest level. In those countries where you see that cybersecurity works very well, it is where it is in the prime minister's or president's office, and where these processes are at least guided or led and supported by the highest level of it. And that's what we see often in some of the countries we work with. And that cybersecurity is, in some ministry somewhere hidden and not really dealt with, and not enough, financial support, not enough political support given in. But if you put it in the president's or the prime minister's office, that is really, what one considers as good practice of having this leadership in cybersecurity and really putting it at this highest level, because it is really an issue that is an issue of national security and so much more, not just of security. And I also, many of the other points that you were raising, I can only reinforce, especially when you were talking about talent, and you very rightly pointed out that one shouldn't only look at technical talent, but also policy, economic, and I think again that's an issue that a message that has to be really emphasized a lot, because that's where we lack the right people in cyber politics and cyber diplomacy. More people need to be trained on these issues, and all of the I think many of the challenges that you raised resonate quite well with me. I think they're similar to other countries as well, especially what you mentioned about this importance of awareness raising and this importance, increased importance of cybersecurity, as you said, in the context of economic development. But I would say not just economic development, but also democratic development, in the sense of what we see a lot in our countries is its increased digitalization of the state sector, which is obviously very much welcomed in the sense of good governance, because if you have, if you move these systems online, or digitalize these systems, then the idea is that they become more effective. But the problem is often, if you digitalize the government services, they have to become with the right cybersecurity, because what is the use of a digitalized system if it's not secured, if it then makes you more vulnerable? So that's what I think not just economic development, but also this governance development has to go hand in hand with cybersecurity.
Okay, Dr. Lu, do you want to respond?
I just have very quick response is I think we should change our mind that cybersecurity is a cost, is a burden, is a risk remedy. I think that cybersecurity is actually advanced. It actually, will empower your future in terms of the digital translation or digital transformation of everything, including government, society, and business. So you will benefit a lot from the investment of the cybersecurity.
Okay, if I may, we can have another round of Q&A. And would you raise your hand if you have questions or comments about Franziska and Dr. Lu's presentations? Okay. Okay, so let me wrap up. Thank you, Franziska and Dr. Lu, for highlighting the importance of cybersecurity. And as Dr. Lu pointed out, that the state's priority is very important. And in this region, we have so many, quite a lot of challenges, traditional one, non-traditional cybersecurity. And today is first kickoff day, and we have a very good starting sessions to highlight the importance of cybersecurity, thanks to the two speakers. So please join me for having a big hands to the two speakers, and then I will give floor to the Lahit after. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Yoshizaki, for your overall kind of moderation. We really appreciate it, and thank you to both the presenter for the comprehensive presentation. It has been really, like, overall, it has been a really good discussion throughout today. And as we have heard, like, there are definitions, there are concepts, there are international laws and regulation that has emerged in the cybersecurity field and will continue to emerge. And also we hear from the regional context as well, there are challenges, there are different notions, and there are different understanding how these laws should be implemented or should be formulated in the context of their own kind of national government context. So it's a good discussion we had during today's session, and that is our aim, that to bring the diverse perspective to this kind of workshops, so that we could share the learning, what worked in one context and what might not work in another context. So it has been really good discussion, and as I said in earlier presentation, tomorrow the focus will be more on international law. So there will be a session on international law. Both the sessions will be touching on the international aspect, international law aspect of cybersecurity. So we'll be going on more detail, like in terms of understanding how the laws will be enacted, in terms of if there is a cyber warfare, what will be its implication, are there enough international laws in place? So we'll be here from different invited speakers from tomorrow in tomorrow's session. So I think it will be further useful for all of us to understand in much more detail how the context of international law is applicable for the cybersecurity. So what I would like to say is thank you all for your time and the patience. And I know, I think it's almost dinner time in most of the countries in the region. So thank you for your patience and thank you for your understanding. And we will look forward towards your presence for tomorrow sessions as well. So from my side, thank you all. Thank you all for your patience and thank you all for your time. Thank you. And I will see you tomorrow again. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Chair.
Bye.